What is up, guys? Fado82 coming at you with some raid cam footage from the US Rustopia server. As always, Rustopia is a vanilla Rust server, and what that means is this footage is Rust as it's intended to be at this point in time. It could be dramatically different if you're watching it in the future, so bear that in mind. What this means for the raid specifically is that on a vanilla server, there's no teleportation commands, no kits, no special privileges or advantages that the players are going to have. Every item they have is crafted by them and carried into the raid, and they can be lost at any point in time, so the stakes on a vanilla Rust raid are extremely high. The footage you're looking at right now is of Riot from the YPB crew scouting out the compound of Dirt McGirt and crew. He's been stalking TM in the bushes and watching every movement and trying to see what's going on here and when the best time to hit this base is. And I'm sure Riot knows that things are unusually quiet at DMG's compound, and that's because DMG is over at the CML compound doing some guerrilla tactics here. They've put up a tower here. It's not a raid tower, it's rather a tower that's going to be used to grief CML and cause them some added stress and pressure. CML raided Dirt McGirt one day into the wipe cycle and pretty much wiped Dirt off the map, so I'm told. I didn't witness it, I wasn't able to record it, but the second day we saw a large party of players, a Zerg if you will, heading toward DMG's base, and there was a bit of a backstory to that which we'll get to in a moment. So Dirt McGirt's over here trying to do some guerrilla tactics and cause some stress onto what he believes to be the Zerg that's going to come back his way. He's roasting his weenie up here in this tower, and CML are peppering him with rockets, fire rockets, incendiary rockets, and he's burning to hell up there. It's going to take him out, and it will take out the sleeping bag that's also around him. That fire will burn up that deployable item as well as Dirt himself. So down here on the ground, you can see that this tower is being lit the fuck up by CML and crew. They're wasting no time here to go ahead and neutralize this threat. They don't know exactly if this is a tower meant to grief them or if it's going to be a staging base for a raid, so they have to take it very seriously and deploy resources to neutralize it very quickly. Even if it's just a sniping tower, it can cause a lot of grief for, say, slaves who are running in between resource rooms or going out to farm. So it's very problematic to have an enemy have a tower anywhere near your compound. So this is an epic move here that Girth Life is attempting to pull off. I believe he's trying to jump down and spam a large exterior stone wall, high exterior stone wall. I think that was the intention there. Girth, if you're watching, let me know. If not, guys, let me know what you think it might have been. But I think it was an epic move, and had it been pulled off, it would have been awesome to see. But still, that valiant attempt is what we like to see in these raid cams and in this raw Rust free cam footage, is those epic moments where players are attempting to do those Hail Mary moves like we saw there. So epic shit, which is always expected to come from the Girth crew. So YPB wasted no time noticing that things were amiss over at DMG's compound, and they're rolling out as the day turns to night, and they move out through the night, covering the map in a roundabout way, taking a very tricky path over to DMG's compound. They're doing it in a way to remain unnoticed. On a high population server, you have to bear in mind that you have to take a path that's going to be the least traveled one, because players will call out your movement. The minute they see a large raid team moving, it's announced in chat, and then it's going to raise the red flags of Dirt, and they want to make sure they get to that base while Dirt's still preoccupied. They know that there's going to be a fight because they know Dirt's online, so they're not trying to offline raid him, but they're trying to hit the base at a point in time where they can get some momentum going. Well, they can have an advantage. It's really awesome to see these players move out in formation here. Raid parties are hard to form, they're hard to manage, and they're moving in sync with one another here. So it's a really well-formed raid party, and you can tell that it has some really good direction. They have team leaders here, and they have people calling the shots. There's not many hiccups here. They are moving in a very directed fashion. When you're moving out to raid, guys, you don't stop and farm resources. You don't fire shots at bears. You have to have your attention solely focused on going towards the objective, which is going to be to raid that base. Notice again the roundabout way they're taking here. They're swimming through vast expanses of water. They're coming out of the water here like a group of elite Navy SEALs, which is really cool to see. And they are taking every precaution here. They're now at the point where we saw before in the previous footage where the fire rocket came down and turned them back. That's not going to happen this time. They're bringing the online raid we all wanted to see. So let's give props to these guys. They're all giving it their A game and really playing this game the way it's meant to be played and pushing it to the limits. So they're up on the beachhead now. They've come up from the cliff, and DMG is still over that raid tower. His penis is on fire at this point in time, but they are coming up here and they are going to be going into a raid base here. It's actually a base that they were able to take over under the cover of night. They were able to take over a base here, which is going to be a base that was previously built by DMG and crew. It's a base that they have building privilege in, so they can go ahead and place down their chests to store their supplies for the raid, place down sleeping bags to respawn that, and it's going to be a place that they can have campfires. Because this is a beach area and this is a water base, it's going to be necessary that they warm up at night to heal up and stay in the fight. Notice as they're rolling out here in the areas that they can, they're placing down the high exterior stone walls, which gives them places to hide behind, so when fire's coming their way from that main base, they're going to be able to have a spot that blocks them from that incoming fire. That's absolutely necessary to do. It's kind of like the old barricades we used to use in Legacy. Go ahead and throw them down. You have a spot to hide behind and to fire from, and you gain a lot of protection from doing that. It's a lot harder to kill a player who's behind a wood or a stone object than it is to take out the player when they're just a spot on the landscape. So C4 has been placed on the first high exterior stone gateway here, and it's been blown through. Now notice that this water base is built in an area that is not the deepest spot, but players still have to start swimming into it at about a midpoint there. That makes it impossible for the raiders to shoot rockets from the water. So they have to actually shoot the rockets from the coastline on land to be able to hit the base. They can't fire from the water because you can't manipulate your weapons when you're in the water. You can still play C4, which is why they're able to go up and use the C4 on the gateways. That's considered to be a tool, but they cannot use weapons that are rocket launchers or AKs or guns in the water. They can use melee weapons in the water, but not the rocket launchers. So all the rockets that are fired here have to be done so from the beach, which means they can't see exactly where they're hitting, and the players who are in the water in terms of the raid party have to call out the shots and direct where those rockets are going to be. They want to open the base up enough so they can get to a point where they can take a foothold in the base, hopefully get to a cabinet, gain some limited privilege if they're able to, which is probably going to be hard with that base design. But they want to get up in there at least where they can start boosting up, getting up through the base. If they can take over that base or part of that base and start working out of that, that's going to be a disadvantage for DMG, and that is really where the fight is focused at this point in time. And the main base is being hit here. It's being opened up with rockets. This is why the honeycomb is so important, because when rockets start flying at the base and it's opening up pathways into the base, you don't want it to be going straight into loot rooms. If it has a few layers of honeycomb to it, it's going to take substantially more manpower and resources in order to get into that inner base. Because this is a water base, it's inherently more difficult to raid. We don't typically see water-based raids on vanilla Rust servers, so I'm super stoked that we caught this footage, and it's really something that is going to be difficult for the raiders to do, especially at night. It's about -34 at night in the water. You can't place down campfires because you don't have building privilege. You can't shoot rockets because you're swimming in the water, and you start swimming at a very early point in that water, even though it looks very shallow. So all the scouting in the world of the base that Riot did couldn't protect him from getting cold. It couldn't protect him from that variable. He knew the water was there, but it's just one of those environmental aspects that's hard to prepare for. When you're dark and cold in Rust, you're fucked, and when you're stuck on the beachhead, it's at a bit of a stalemate. So at this point in time, guys, I just wanted to backtrack for a moment. When the video started, there was some footage of a base, and it had a sign on it relating to a betrayal that happened. So there was some Rust footage I uploaded in the last Rust Tactics video that had the initial Zerg that was coming towards this base a couple days ago featured in there, and there was some controversy over that I didn't know the full story. And guys, you know, on Rustopia, I'm sort of the specter flying around, and I will record anything I see that seems interesting and valuable to the Rust community, and it's meant to be shown to the Rust community for a greater good, for a utilitarian perspective. It's not meant to diss any groups, so sorry if anybody got butthurt off that footage, but it is what it is. So I was going to prove a point and name Dirt's base Big Floppy Vagina on a map you're going to see in a moment of the layout here to illustrate sort of some of the tactics that are being used, but I didn't want to stoke the fire. I don't like drama, guys. I was just trying to prove a point that there's no favoritism. DMG is featured in videos just like everyone else. At times there might be more DMG content because that's where the action is, where I'm at that point in time. I have limited time to spend recording, and I'm able to capture what I capture. So enough said about that. Let's get back into the raid cam. It's night, so it's very hard to see what's going on in Rust, but as you can see, muzzle flashes are lighting up the night sky here, as are the newly added laser sights in the game, which do increase the accuracy of the guns if you're not aware of that. So what's going on also into the cover night of here is that the Plan Clan, which is allied with CML and YPB, part of the raid team, they are building up a raid tower here, which is going to be a tower that's going to allow them to have another forward operating base here, another point that they can deploy their sleeping bags and resources to, a place where they can fire rockets towards the main compound and help suppress some of the defense that's going on over there, but also a way that's going to be just another thing for DMG to now manage. They have to consider the effects that this tower is going to have, and that's their main opposition really at this point in time. They can keep the raiders at bay on the ground and in the water, but the tower is going to be problematic if that is allowed to stay there. So lots of rockets exchanged between the tower and then the main base. DMG is rightly so very concerned about that threat. Down on the ground here, lots of gunfire going on during the night sky, and as the night progresses here, we're starting to see the towers come into play here. The towers that surround the base here, we call them flank towers, are really important in base design. So you want to line up towers around the perimeter of your base or the landscape around your base to be able to counter against threats like this, raid parties. When these towers are set up and you have a main base the way that DMG has here, there's points covered here where they can provide suppressing fire to the raid teams at any point in time, and that really makes raiding these areas very difficult and very hard to plan for. So again, all these raiders here and the defenders, they're all in their A games at this point in time. These are best-in-class Rust players as far as I'm concerned on vanilla Rust servers. This is, in my mind, really, almost esports for Rust. These players take it seriously, and let's give them props again for doing that. There's no failed raid necessarily here, because this is just, it is what it is, and it's a fight. They're both fighting as hard as they possibly can, and that's what you want to see in these raid cams. So let's keep it positive, guys. I'm not trying to get off on a tangent about that, but the importance here of this raid tower that needs to be neutralized is that notice that now Plan has a height advantage that is on par with the main base, which is problematic for DMG. You can see that straight through the shooting ports here, the embrasures. They can see right into points of the main base that otherwise they wouldn't be able to see. That's why those vantage points are so necessary. They can snipe right into the base, take out some of the defenders. Now, in terms of what the defense is doing here, that is absolutely important, is they are remaining calm. They're not leaving their bases. They're using their towers, and they're using their main base appropriately. They're staying in there knowing that they have the cover, and they're just picking off the raiders and remaining focused on that. It's very hard to stay focused when C4 and rockets are going off, so experienced Rust players know that, they have to remain calm, and the fight's not over till it's over. Raiding is, as I've said many times in probably every raid game, a battle of resources, a battle of attrition. And here, what's keeping the raiders held down are the towers by DMG and the main base, and then you can see that the problem for DMG is mainly going to be Plan's compound there. So that map gives you sort of a perspective. You guys need to pause that and then take a look at the raid cam after doing that. That might help give you some perspective on what's going on here. But the aerial map, I think, is very helpful to see. So lots of ground fighting is going on here, but most of this ground fighting is the raiders firing back towards the towers here. The raiders are stuck at this point in time. So the night has changed. It's now day, but the movements of the raiders can be seen very clearly. Unfortunately for the raiders, this day was very clear in Rust. The skies were sunny and the clouds were not in place. When Rust is in an environmental phase where it's cloudy, it's very hard to see, and things would look dramatically different. We probably would only be able to see a little bit in front of that tower that Plan is constructing there if it were foggy. So the environment in Rust plays a very important aspect in how raids happen, and in this case, I think it's to the disadvantage of the raiders because they can be clearly seen from those flank towers. Whereas if it were foggy, it would be more difficult for the defenders rather, to call out the targets and to be able to fire at the raiders. Now keep in mind with this footage too, guys, this is after the addition of the 4x scopes in Rust, so that people in the towers are able to snipe a lot better because they have access to now scopes that zoom right in, and they're very effective in situations like this. So a 4x zoom is nothing for the area in terms of where the raiders are in proportion to those flank towers. So very, very important. So in the flank tower here, as we pan out, notice that the points of reference on the flank tower really give the raiders limited options in terms of where they can be shielded from the fire here. So they have a few high exterior stone walls they can hide behind. They have fire set up there, but the bodies are starting to pile up here. So the body count is rising, and the majority of the bodies here are going to be from the raiders. There are some defenders mixing in here, trying to mix it up on the ground with some small arms fire, but the majority of the casualties here are going to be on the side of the raiders. That is not to say the raiders are doing anything wrong or that we could do anything better. It is what it is, and again, everyone is trying their absolute best, and that's all that we want to see in a raid cam, and then we can discuss the tactics and the variables, and that's really what these raid cams are meant to be. So this is a beautiful example of that, though. We can see here, as we take that bird's eye perspective, what we saw on that stationary map on that image a moment ago are those different raid towers in proportion in relation to the main base, and then we can see the tower here by plan as well. So as raids often happen on high population servers, the landscape conforms and changes around the raid. The raid towers will be constructed, the bases that are being raided will tend to change as well, and the raiders have to worry about keeping the momentum going. In raids, that is the most important thing. Defenders can hold off raids, even large-scale Zerg raids. Not that that's what this is. I don't see this as really being necessarily a Zerg raid, because this is a hard-ass base to raid. Even a few defenders are able to hold back a lot of players because of the design of the base. So you kind of do need a lot of players to be able to raid this type of base. So I do think that needs to be kept in mind. Getting back to the nature of, though, a Zerg raid or a raid in general, if you can hold off the raiders for about 10 minutes to 15 minutes, chances are you're going to have out-resourced them at that point in time. If raids aren't well organized, they're going to expend a lot of their resources very quickly, which means they can't put a lot of forethought into how they're breaching the base. That oftentimes is going to be to the advantage of the defenders. In a case like this, though, this raid lasted about 2 hours. So I've condensed the footage down into a little over 20 minutes, which is as short as it could be to really get the point across, I think. But raids on vanilla Rust servers happen very slowly, very methodically, and keep that in mind too, guys, that this is a 2-hour raid condensed down in this footage. So there was a lot of back and forth here, a lot of fire. It wasn't a raid that happened as quickly as it seems in this footage. Lots of editing has to go into the raid cams, and it's actually quite a process. It's a process that I enjoy, but one that is very painstaking. So as we pan again back out here, the fight is really, at this point, limited to this area of high exterior stone walls, which is a bit of a maze of death here. The raiders are now regrouping back at their staging base here, figuring out what their next moves are going to be. At this point in time, they have a couple choices. They can run away or they can stay in the fight. For them, running away is not an option at this point in time. They came to fight, and that is what they're going to do. They're back at the main base here, figuring out how they're going to breach it. In the water here, they're assessing which wall they want to go through and what's going to give them the best way in there. But again, it's a very precarious situation. They're also looking for bodies in there of raiders who went down. There are reported to be some raiders who went down in the water here with lots of rockets. So they may have been in here not looking to scout an area, as I said a moment ago, but to maybe look for rockets or fallen items from previous players. That again is a very difficult spot for the raiders to be in when you're raiding a water base. Your body goes down and your loot is going to be a lot harder to get to when it's in the water. Another interesting tactic about water-based designs is with the new addition of how water affects fire. I'm not sure if you can use the incendiary rockets to burn through the building cabinets the way you can on land. I haven't tested that yet, so that's purely speculative, but that might be something that, we need to test out and just see, because that would make water bases even all the more beneficial and powerful at this point in the game. Again, that's subject to change at any point in time, but I've always loved water-based designs, and this is an example of why. Initially, looking at it, I thought the water would be way too shallow to be effective, but it's very effective even early on. So DMG is doing again what they need to do at this point in time, remaining calm and taking out every aspect of this plan tower that they're able to before plan can upgrade it. And the Raiders are doing exactly what they need to do as well. They are now broken into separate fire teams. They're hitting the outer flank towers here, which are giving them the most retreat. In order for them to progress forward with this raid, they need to neutralize these flank towers rather. They either need to take them out completely or blow them up, or take them over and take them as their own. Taking them over as their own is going to be more cost effective. It would require less rockets and C4 to be able to get to a cabinet than it would be to blow it off the map completely. Also, if they take it over, the defenders then have to come out and use their own resources to take over their own tower, which is a bit of a, FU to the person you're raiding, and is something that is, going to definitely stoke the fire, but is definitely a valid tactic to use in a raid. They are expending no resources here with the Raiders. They're trying to deploy their rockets to get into that base as quickly as possible, but they're neglecting using enough resources on the raid tower, or the flank tower rather, that is on the hill. So I don't know if perhaps when this first went down, the flank tower on the hill wasn't well manned, but some of DMG's members are now spawning back into the flank tower on the hill that we're going to take a look at right now. And this flank tower is now firing down directly into the tower that was just hollowed out and opened up. So they have a direct line of fire going right down into there, which means they're shredding through the Raiders who were in the tower. So that was a noble effort of the Raiders and a valiant attempt. And again, everyone on their A game, first in class. Rust gameplay that I believe we're seeing here for Vanilla Rust, going right in there, and it's a ballsy move, a move that needs to be made. YPB makes very good tactical decisions, and when they decide to go for things, they go for things. They don't typically run away from fights. That's not something that is true of them. So when we saw that Zerg raid before that turned around, there was a backstory there where there was a traitor, apparently, and they had to call off the raid because it was too risky at that point in time, and that is certainly respectable. But we can see here that they fight with intensity. They go for objectives, they hollow into these bases, and this was not a raid that ended quickly. Again, keep in mind when watching this footage, this was about a 2-hour raid that I would condense down into a minimum of 20, or a little over 20 minutes, which was necessary to really translate the footage. So in terms of who the winner is, who the loser is here, well, DMG kept his base, but I think everybody brought their A game, and everybody won because we all got to experience a great raid together, and now the community gets to experience a great raid. YPB and CML used great tactics with group formation when they rolled out for the raid, getting to their objective in a very fast way, not using any resources on anything other than the raid. They had a raid base that was already scouted out and existing in the landscape, and a lot of thought went into this raid. It wasn't rushed. It didn't go down as planned, but that's often what happens when you're stuck on a beach in Rust. It's negative 34. You can't shoot your rockets. The biggest player in this raid cam was really the water. That's really what decided the fate of the raid here, and that is why Rust is such an amazing game, and you really have to consider all variables like where you're building. The environmental aspects play a huge role in Rust. When you're dark and you're cold, you are fucked, and this raid ended up being a stalemate between the two groups. It was a very fun raid to watch, and DMG used those towers wisely, and with a minimal amount of snipers, they were able to neutralize a very large raid threat. Great job all around. As always, guys, thank you so much for bringing your A game to the raid and being able to show it to the Rust community. I had a lot of fun watching it and making this video. As always, Fade82, peace.